The following episode of the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters radio show was originally broadcast on June 8th, 2021.
Aloha and welcome, Maui, to Business Matters radio show, sponsored by Mokulele Airlines and Sherry Reeve Gallery and Gifts. I am your host, Pamela Tumput, president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, and today we're going to talk about the construction industry of Maui. We're going to talk a little bit about the Paycheck Protection Program, loan forgiveness, and tax issues, and hear from a Molokai Wahine business owner. So to get started, I'd first like to welcome Josh Berlien. He is the owner of Berlien Consulting, LLC. His company specializes in strategic development of contractors and construction management services. He is also the chairman of the Construction Industry of Maui, which is a trade council of the Maui Chamber of Commerce. Aloha and good morning, Josh. I'm glad to have you with us.
Aloha and good morning to you too, Pam. It's always a pleasure to be here with you.
Oh, thank you. We love spending time with you too, and you folks are doing such amazing work. So tell us, as the chair of the construction industry of Maui, can you give us an overview about how things have been going during COVID, and how is the construction industry doing now?
The construction industry, it remains very robust. During COVID, it was definitely a challenge. While others, shut down and sheltered their business, many people wanted to take advantage of the lack of occupancy, the lack of business, and take care of certain things that they've always wanted to, whether it's refreshers or renovations. So we considered essential workers, always continued on and did not skip a beat. So while that was kind of an additional layer of ramp up, we also had an additional layer of new compliance to follow suit on.
Yes.
I know that there was pressure throughout the whole pandemic to see our industry shut down, and one of the beautiful things that happened was the CIM partnered with the Chamber, all the labor unions, other contractor organizations, and about 200 different businesses to make a uniform pledge of COVID protocol across our industry. And that was presented to all county mayors as well as the governor. I think it had a big impact in keeping our industry rolling through the pandemic. It's nice to see that we're coming out of it and things are getting back to normal. It gives us a little breathing room to get back to how we normally operate. So coming out of this and looking down the road into 2022, things are definitely still busy. We are seeing a bit of a slowdown on the public side for state and county work, but I did catch that in the county budget, it looks like they're going to propose spending a significant amount of money on infrastructure improvements, which is great to see.
Yes.
On the private side, the retail industry, tenant build-outs, that was definitely one of the hardest hits during COVID, and that's starting to come back to life. I'm seeing those projects that were canceled or paused start to circle back to life, which is great to see. And, off the top of my head, I know of 7 different developments that are all 100% affordable that have either recently bid, so they're right there about to start. Some are in progress, and there's 4 that are still in the entitlement process. So a lot of great stuff coming. Obviously we always have our challenges with the permitting process and entitlement use processes, and then the ripple impact that came out of the COVID pandemic is the material cost increase that we're seeing, and it's just running rampant. And it's a little bit of that perfect storm. You had supply chains disrupted, manufacturing chains disrupted when they did get going. They were at limited capacity under COVID protocol. And you pair that with a lot of people at home, a lot of businesses, that want to do construction projects. low interest rates, so everyone pulled the trigger and wanted to build or make improvements. So there's a huge issue with supply and demand paired with inflation on these prices. Lumber's the one that everyone is aware of. In the past year, over 200% material increases on lumber. So you talk about a rock and a hard place. Imagine the conversation if a contractor sits down who bid a project 8 months ago, has seen their material pricing go up 187%, and they have to sit down with their client and try not to jeopardize that relationship while still recovering some of that money. Very interesting discussions that need to happen with a contractor, owner, developer relationship. So pretty much all good things. Those are just some of the question marks hanging out there down the road, the material pricing, as well as some of the proposed bills that we're seeing introduced to council.
All great points, and I have been talking to a lot of people, particularly in the lumber arena, and of course with a lot of the fires, a lot of lumber supply disappeared, and with a lot of the disasters on the mainland, a lot of that lumber, is going to address some of the significant damaged areas across the country as well. So and then we've got the added shipping costs. So as you say, these are some really significant issues, and it does, point to one of the things that we always talk about on affordable housing and rentals, and the time is now to build. Every time we delay building, costs go up, and something happens from a variety of standpoints, not necessarily just resource scarcity, but something always happens. Time seems to always add more costs. So, now even at the higher prices, we know, it's still really important to move forward with these important construction projects because things are going to continue to go up. So that's
correct.
Thank you. Yeah, that takes me to another point on building because, as you know, and the construction industry of Maui has discussed, we have now not one but two bills relating to moratoriums on building permits for visitor accommodations. It began more as a wait and see. Let's do our community plans in West and South Maui. Then it morphed into a broader moratorium, and now we have a second bill that is looking for all visitor accommodations. And, the first bill expanded to all visitor accommodations, not just hotels and resorts and timeshares and things like that. And then the second bill now is not just in West and South Maui, but all visitor accommodations across Maui Island. And so there's a proposed bill to also establish a new chapter under Chapter 20 for environmental protection in this. Josh, tell us a little bit about CIM's position on these moratorium bills.
I'm going to be authoring some testimony on this. I'm trying to get up to speed, and I have studied it a little bit. And as an organization, we oppose this. I want to backtrack and just as an example, the recent legislation that put the developer's requirement of affordable units to 75%. It was overturned by Mayor Victorino. When we look at something like that, we can say, okay, I do believe that there's good intention at heart, but to realize cumulative impact and ripple effect that this has across the local economy, I don't think that is completely realized when our local government tries to decree out how much a project should cost and sent to a developer. The free market, I believe, will always prevail and correct itself. And when you see bills regulate how businesses operate, really the people that get put in the crossfire and really get hurt the most are the working class and the middle class, and the gap grows wider as an unintended consequence, let's call it that. Now, with these moratoriums on the visitor industry, I am trying to scratch my head and say, unlike the 75% where it was maybe good intention, I'm trying to figure out what the good intention is on this, because this would be another piece of legislation that ultimately just hurts the people on Maui that work and live here. What's the overall intent other than to just flat out stop things? So we're definitely opposed to this. I do need to study up on it a little bit more. I have heard that other organizations, labor unions, are definitely ringing out against it. And I've heard that there are legal minds that are saying that this will definitely be challenged. And I can see why. From what I understand is that this would apply to projects, the line would be drawn if you have an active building permit. And if you're talking about a development where someone has gone out, either has previously bought the land or bought the land with the intent to create something, that's a huge cost. Now, they may be well into the design phase, so now they have a tremendous amount of soft costs already invested in this. And then the local government is going to come in and just hit the brakes. You're literally going to cost people millions and millions of dollars, where the government's telling them what they can and cannot do with their property. So not only do I see ultimately the workers, people like myself, they're the ones that'll get hurt, but legally I see an issue with this. So that's really all I got to say about it. It feels like the working class in Maui is constantly having to keep up with this legislation, and we're already busy enough trying to make our businesses work. Not to be too sassy here on something, but that's the equivalent if I push a moratorium out there on salaries for public officials. You're threatening people's livelihoods here. It's no joke. It's scary to me.
It is one of the points that was made by Councilmember Keani Rollins is that, they are in this, in her version of the moratorium, putting in a TIG, a temporary investigative group to take a look at this. And our point has always been that's work that we could be doing now. We don't need to put a moratorium in place and then establish a TIG. We should be establishing a TIG to look into this and having discussion and debate before putting in a moratorium. So it is, both bills are still active. And yesterday, for those who are listening and tuning in, we are talking about council proposed moratoriums, 2 different moratorium bills. Paul Brubaker, one of our top state economists, spoke on this issue yesterday. And we will be making the recording available on the Chamber website. It's also available on the county website. I don't know that it's been uploaded yet, but it should be probably today. But it's worth watching. Great information from an economic standpoint on why moratoriums, are not good and not helpful. And there was a great question asked by Councilmember Mike Molina about, well, we did a moratorium in the past. And Paul shared some of the statistics on why this is a very different time from that moratorium to now. So, our point with the Maui Chamber of Commerce is to really look at it and say, we want to do the research first before putting in the legislation. We want to make sure that we have a chance to look at all of those impacts so that, again, we mitigate things in advance. And many of the challenges people have been sharing in terms of why they want to see this moratorium, of course, those are all challenges we share. But there's also ways to continue to address those and address them now without having a moratorium. So that's been the key position for us.
I completely agree that you have to study this out to see what the total impact is and the ripple effect. We have a limited amount of economic drivers in our community. Obviously, tour is one of them. Construction is the other. And the money that comes from developments, it comes from construction, it creates jobs. It's like a source economic driver that if that gets impacted, it'll have the ripple effect down to someone who is a laborer not being able to go buy a 6-pack of soda and bubble gum at the store that then hurts that vendor. So it'll ripple through our economy, our community, and it'll be the people that get hurt.
Yeah, that is our deep concern. And as you point out, you're hitting two major economic drivers with this. And then again, the trickle-down effect. And what we've learned is the trickle-down effect is great, far more than we ever expected. So in all this, Josh, you guys have been working hard to continue to do projects. A lot of people had renovations. You were still working on some big projects. Hotels were renovating while they were shut down. I know other home builders were. And we've got a bright future going forward. But in addition to all of this, CIM is really investing in the future of the industry, and you have a phenomenal Construction Industry of Maui scholarship program. Can you tell us about this program?
Absolutely. In our mission statement, the word educate is there. And definitely during the pandemic, we had to refocus what we can do as an organization. Obviously, the in-person training, the lunch and learns, our monthly pauhanas, it all came to a halt. So, what can we do? We can still educate children, our future. That does not stop, and that needed to push on. Obviously, getting more involved as a legislative voice was something else that we could put on our radar. Now, with our scholarship program, we put this together. We've awarded now for 4 years, and we named this scholarship after Bob Paulson of Rita Paulson General Contracting. He was one of the original members of the CIM board, and he passed away suddenly a few years ago. And Bob was he's just a good dude. Everyone liked him, so it was befitting that the scholarship be named after him. And with the scholarship, we really want to make a impact, a life-changing impact. So what we do is each year at our holiday party, we shake down all our members pretty good for donations, auctions, and all money raised, we dedicate to just giving 2 scholarships to Maui graduating seniors that are going into construction management, architecture, design, engineering, something industry related. It's a tremendous time commitment. Since we're all volunteers, this is our give back to the community. So we have several members, several board members, committee members. It takes a lot to pull this off. I got to give a little shout out to my wife, Taylor, because she gives up her time with me while I'm doing this stuff. So it's fun when she gets to come to some of the functions, but it's a huge time commitment.
Yeah.
But it's all worth it because in the end, we have kids that are leaving Maui and not coming back. And we want those kids who have Maui in their heart to get their education, and we want to encourage them to come back. We want them to get the skill sets. There's a tremendous void of qualified professionals in our industry, and that's even more magnified here on Maui where the cost of living is so high and it's difficult for these young adults to make it on their own. So this past year, so the second consecutive year that we handed 2 graduating seniors each a check for $15,000 and said, "Go get them and do your best." Then, to counter that, the other half of our industry comes from vocational trades, and we need to also replenish that pool. So what we're gearing up is a similar program to run in parallel. And that'll be geared towards young adults that are focusing more on vocational trades, carpentry, plumbing, becoming an electrician. And what we're going to do is we're going to set up a program to our member companies, and it'll be, hey, nominate your top apprentice, your top helper, your rising star. And what the CIM is going to do is we're going to have gift cards awarded to a local supply house where they can go out and just fill their tool bag with everything they need. Because you can easily go into like Slim's or Home Depot and walk out $1,000 lighter and not still have every tool that young tradesmen's expected to have in their tool bag. So that's the next thing that we're doing, is to also stimulate the trades, and the overall intent is to invest in these young individuals so that we have the Maui youth become the Maui leaders and keep that Maui culture here in our industry.
Well, on that note, that was awesome. And Josh, really quickly, give everybody the CIM website address.
Well, we just changed that up, and it is we did a website overhaul, and it is CIMMaui.com, and you can find all information about becoming a member, scholarship opportunities, and we encourage people to get involved because we do also like to have a lot of fun.
Yes, you do, and you have great parties. Well, Josh, thank you so much for being our guest today and sharing all about the Construction Industry of Maui Trade Council and educating our audience on the proposed visitor accommodations moratorium, how the industry has been faring, and what you're looking at in the future, and your scholarship program. We've loved having you on the show.
Pam, it's a pleasure. You have a wonderful day.
I will. You too. Thank you so much. Aloha, Josh. All right, well, we're going to turn to a quick message from Mokulele Airlines, one of our sponsors.
Mokulele Airlines operates the largest commuter airline hub in the country, right here in Kahului. Fly Mokulele from Kahului to Molokai, Lanai, Hana, Waimea, Kona, and now Hilo. Mokulele also operates the only flights between Kapalua and Honolulu. There is never a middle seat on Mokulele, and every seat has a window and aisle. Visit mokuleleairlines.com and take your next flight from the newly renovated Mokulele Terminal.
We're back. If you are just tuning in, this is Business Matters, a program of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, and I'm your host, Pamela Tumpa, president of the Chamber. It is now my pleasure to welcome Doug Levin. He is a partner at Levin and Tabon. Doug is a specialist in taxation of C&S corporations, partnerships, and high net worth individuals. He has additional expertise in multi-state taxation, U.S. taxation of foreign operations, and Doug earned a bachelor's degree of science in business administration, a certificate in accounting, and a master's in business taxation. He is also an amateur photographer. Aloha, Doug, and welcome to the show.
Aloha, Pam. It's great to be here. How are you this morning?
I'm excellent. How are you?
I'm good. Other than the fact this is way too early in the morning for me. I'm one of those late workers, There's a theory that early risers are better, but I don't agree. I'm a late riser, and I work during that quiet time when everybody else goes home to get things done. But I'm here for you. I'm here.
I so appreciate that. To be honest with you, Doug, I'm like you. I am a late person. I'm usually up very late at night, so these mornings are a little early for me as well. But
oh, see, it all comes out. Really, this is going to be one of those bonding experiences together.
That's
here.
Right.
Oh,
I know. That's when I'm really missing my cup of coffee this morning. but it's good. It's so important. It actually is a great time to share with people because they can listen on their drive time to work, and so we're really enjoying the show and appreciate having you on.
No problem.
Well,
so, you have an agenda for me today, yes?
Well, yes, we do, because we have a lot of questions that people have been asking at the Chamber. So the first thing we wanted to ask you to talk a little bit about is the Paycheck Protection Program. How is it working? There was the first draw PPP loan, the second draw PPP loan, and then now people are in the forgiveness period, especially with the first draws. I know some people were reluctant to take a second draw because they were still waiting to see about forgiveness of the first. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit about the forgiveness program and how people can maximize that. Any tips or tricks?
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. There was some drama around that, given that Congress originally said way back in April of last year when they passed this thing as part of the CARES Act, that the loans were not supposed to be taxable. Right. And the IRS, a few weeks afterwards, came out and said, oh, yeah, we're not going to make them taxable. But guess what? The expenses that we just reimbursed you for you can't deduct those, which basically makes it taxable.
Taxable, right?
So, Congress really didn't like this, but of course they weren't getting along. They rarely get along. And sometime in December, they decided that they said that the expenses would be deductible. So the act that passed in late December, the third round of CARE, it's not CARES Act, it's got another name, but the third round of stimulus basically said you could deduct the expenses and the money wasn't taxable. So at least on the federal side, everybody's set. Okay?
All right.
So the problem is actually on the state side, where the state of Hawaii, of course, needs money because they don't get to print it like the federal government does. And so there was a lot of noise about whether or not the state would make them taxable or not. Okay? And I refer to them as being taxable, even though technically what it is it's a disallowance of expenses. It's basically they're taxable because the effect is identical in terms of its net effect on somebody's, taxable income.
Right.
So the state went back and forth with the legislature and left the State Department of Taxation without any guidance until after the extension filing season, which has created a huge problem for people who didn't know this. But a few weeks ago in May, the State Department of Taxation issued a TIR, a Tax Information Release, 2021-03. And if you haven't read it yet, it's basically a rehash of the idea that the expenses aren't deductible, which is fine. We kind of expected that from the state of Hawaii. We weren't a problem with it. There is, however, a huge problem with it. And that problem is that they basically said that the loans are presumed to be forgiven and the expense is not deductible in 2020, not in 2021. So if you received a loan in 2020, and it's one of those loans that's most likely going to be written off because it's under $150,000, there's no real doubt about it, presuming you spent it on the right things. The state is arguing that you have to pick it up in income in 2020. The problem is they didn't tell us until late May after the extended due date.
Right.
And so many people did not make a big enough extension payment. If you did extend your return as a business, you may have problems with this. You should talk to your tax advisor on how to deal with this. I've been in contact with the local president of the Hawaiian Association of Public Accountants to reach out to the state and ask for some sort of penalty waivers or guidance for how to address the fact that the guidance on when we had to pick it up came in so late. But this is kind of a critical issue that a lot of taxpayers aren't aware of. I'm basically sending all my clients a copy of that TR and going, okay, what do you want to do? Do you want to wait, or do you want to wait and see if the state issues some further guidance on alleviating penalties on underpayment and extension or things like that? So that's kind of been a rude awakening. Any questions about that at the moment?
Well, I have a comment about it first, and then I'm glad that you're covering this. So, let's work together, because I think this is something that not only would the Maui Chamber of Commerce, of course, jump in on and support the penalty waivers, but I think chambers of commerce statewide, we're not having that level of discussion, or I haven't heard that level of discussion amongst some of our statewide briefings yet. But I think that that's really important because, especially for these people who filed and were filing on time. And, we've seen this sort of throughout the pandemic where we're starting programs and then the guidance isn't fully there. And so there's a lot of questions about what is or isn't forgivable, or, now how do we do the taxes and do them appropriately and not have to redo our taxes, or worse yet, get penalized. So what are some of the overarching things that you're seeing people do? Is it just across the board and very individualized, or a majority of people saying we want to redo our taxes now?
I don't have a lot of guidance on what people have chosen yet, because we're sort of for my clients who were extended and didn't make enough of a payment and extension for Hawaii because of this sudden change. We're basically sort of waiting to see if we get any guidance from the state.
Okay.
We're still in process anyway. Normally the lull after the end of the season, we're busy getting easier individual returns out and other things that don't have the same issue. And most of the bigger stuff gets done that has bigger numbers attached to it later in the summer. And so I have a little bit of time yet. But the guidance comes down to, first off, it's a tax information release, which means it's not authoritative. It's just informational. The state is basically taking the position that this is what they want to see. but it doesn't have the authoritative force of law in theory, although in practice, it might. So a person could take the position, I've already filed, I'm not going to amend, I'm going to pick the income up in 2021. Perfectly valid thing to do. You might get penalized or audited on that. Or accept the fact that you're going to get penalized and audited for not having picked it up on the originally filed return or the extension in the first place. It's kind of a tough position, and I'm kind of hoping the state Department of Taxation comes through and gives us some guidance on how to fix this for people, considering how late their guidance on what they wanted us to do came through.
Yeah, this sounds, like a lot of nuances that comes down to perception and interpretation. And we never know how people are going to roll. And what we keep always saying when it comes to, both county and state, businesses need to know clear rules on what they're operating by so that they're trying to do the right thing, but we need clear guidance, clear and consistent guidance on how to move forward. So, yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that up, Doug, because this is something that we definitely want to assist with. And I'll call you after and see how we can work with you to educate other chambers of commerce across the state and see what, maybe we can do a forum or something that's broader as well to make businesses more aware of this, but also to work with our elected officials.
If the broader business community helps and not just the practitioner community, that might be very helpful. If they begin to realize that this is an issue and because the state automatically penalizes people 5% a month for each month you're late. So you already have a 5% penalty on any underpayment that you incurred because you didn't make a big enough payment extension because you didn't plan on this income in 2020.
Right.
So.
Right. It would be interesting to see. I don't even have an idea on the size of how many people are impacted, but I think as more and more people understand this, we're going to find out.
I'm expecting it to impact about 1 out of 4 of my clients.
Wow.
Because of the nature of the PPP loans are not small. They're a very sizable chunk of cash that was used to stimulate small businesses, and they were greatly appreciated during COVID. But at the same time, and we kind of had to expect that the state was going to tax them because they could use a little bit of revenue. But the question was the timing, and when we learned about the timing is kind of where the problem is hanging up. And it'll become more common as people start to chat with their tax practitioner, and they have to basically show them this TIR and go, okay, what do you want to do? Because ultimately it's up to the taxpayer to decide how they want to file under the circumstances.
Well, I'm going to encourage people. Do you have that on your website, Doug? Otherwise, we can send them to ours. Do you have the tax guidance up?
I don't have a lot of information on my website because I'm in the early stages of trying to get an answer from the state. I'm hoping that the first person who posts something about it is the State Department of Taxation. That's my hope.
All right. Well, we'll do a little research, folks. So if you're tuning in, we're talking about PPP loan forgiveness and Go ahead.
But I can repeat that TIR. It's Tax Information Release 2021-3. And you can go to tax.hawaii.gov in order to go to their tax rulings, and you can read that. It's like a 2 or 3 page TIR, and it basically quotes a Rev Proc and some other statements. But the answer is it's timing. You'll see that the date is in May, and that it's way after the due date. So.
Okay, well, we're going to encourage you to do that. We will, in a couple days, make sure that link is up on the Chamber's website as well to help people find that. So let's talk, Doug, about the newly expanded Employee Retention Credit, a federal tax credit helping financially impacted businesses pay employees. Talk a little bit about this credit.
All right. So I am not going to claim to be an expert in this as that other issue we just discussed about because I don't do a lot of payroll work. But I did do a little bit of following up on this. You're now companies that it used to be that companies that had paycheck used to be the thing we were just discussing, Paycheck Protection Program (PPP) loans were not able to apply for the Employee Retention Credit, the ERTC. Now, based on the law changes that occurred in December, you may now do so. You're not allowed to double dip. You're not allowed to use the same expenses that you used for the PPP loan for the employee retention credit, but it is a valuable credit. It's another very lucrative credit that people should be considering. It used to also have stricter requirements about who qualified, but now the qualifications, while not easy, for some businesses will still make a lot of sense. Okay, so the CAA changed the CAA, which is the bill that changed it. Changed the definition of small employer to a company with no more than 500 employees, which makes it basically, almost all small businesses.
Right.
This allows many more companies to count all wages paid during the qualified period, which makes it easier to calculate and leads to larger credits. Okay. Under the old act, a company needed more than a 50% decline in gross receipts compared to the same quarter in 2019. So, let's say you're looking at the second quarter of 2020, you had to have a more than 50% decline in gross receipts over the same quarter in 2021 in order to qualify. Now, it's a 20% decline in gross receipts in 2021. So if the first quarter of 2021 was more than a 20% decrease from the first quarter of 2019, you qualified. Same thing for the second quarter. Okay? If you do qualify, if you do qualify, it becomes a, I just want to check this. The credit is equal to 70% of the employee's qualified wages and health expense for that quarter. So up to a cap of $7,000 per employee for each of the 2 quarters. So if you have an employee in which you're, let's say you're paying them $10,000 a quarter, which would be $5,000 a month, you could receive a $7,000 credit for each of the 2 quarters, quarter 1 and quarter 2 of 2021. If you had a more than 50% reduction in your gross receipts in the first quarter of 2021 or the second quarter of 2021 versus the same quarters in 2019. Okay? Makes sense so far. This is the kind of thing I'd prefer to whiteboard, Pam. I got to be honest with you.
I can see why.
It's hard to talk about on a radio show.
It really is.
Just verbal stuff. It's challenging. I'm doing the best I can. There's one last little caveat. If you think, oh gosh, I don't qualify because the economy took off in the quarter. Our economy started to take off in February this year, and you don't have a more than 20% reduction. There is another thing where you can use the prior quarter. So for quarter 1 of 2021, you can use the last quarter of 2020, which was still a quarter deep in the doldrums here on Maui. And it's less than a comparative quarter, which I believe would be the fourth quarter of 2018, but I'd have to check on that. That's something to check with your advisor on, because I'm not going to be able to do this live on air. But if that's correct, so if your last quarter of 2020 was still dead, which for many of my clients still was before the economy came back, you may very well qualify. And if you were paying employees during that period, you can get up to a 70% credit of what you were paying for them. Now, this is kind of big, because by this time, the PPP loans are pretty much all used up, even the second round of PPP loans.
Right. And
so you can get a huge employment tax credit back from the feds, equal up to 70% of the cost of what you're doing if you fit this gross receipts test. It's basically, in gross receipts, just to be clear, is the revenue that you receive from your business. If you did $100,000 in revenue in the first quarter of 2019, and in the first quarter of 2021, you only did $68,000, or you're less than 20%. You have a more than 20% reduction, you qualify. Okay, and you should definitely talk to your payroll service provider or your accountant about this. For my own particular clients, I'm sort of taking a wait and see approach, because we're busy with income tax returns and other stuff. We're probably going to use November and December of this coming year in order to look back and see whether or not there was any potential benefit for our clients. Just because you are allowed to file a 941X, which is an amended payroll tax return, to claim these benefits later. Okay? So, but it is something to start to put on your it is something to have a conversation with your payroll tax provider or otherwise if you think you meet these requirements.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm glad to know, and I think you did an awesome job covering, the different ways that it's been expanded. And so, folks, that really is sort of the bottom line. Again, we get back to changing legislation. Again, it's COVID times. I mean, everybody's the key thing was that we saw during this time, during, say, the 2008 recession, where we didn't see a lot of relief and support for small businesses, is Congress has been working really hard to recognize the impacts on small businesses. But we sometimes roll things out and then we go, well, wait a minute, what about this? What about that? How do we address all these things that haven't been clear? And they've been good at also going back and expanding things to be more helpful. So I'm glad that you mentioned that, Doug, because it is a great program that, again, as you point out, PPP is done. So if you do qualify for this, you definitely want to talk to your tax preparer and see how you might be able to leverage this opportunity. So,
yeah, and I concur. Congress did a great job this time around stimulating small businesses. In prior recessions, small business was left to basically dangle at the end of the rope and get by. And this time they basically stepped up and really helped, which, is fantastic. And this is one of the last things I think they're going to pass. Because now with the economy basically back, looking at your first and second quarter of this year and seeing how it did compared to 2019, if for some reason your business was still in the doldrums or even in the fourth quarter of last year, this is something you should be looking at.
Yeah, that is awesome. Well, are there any other tax tips or hints or things that business owners who've maybe filed their taxes already, but things that they can think about as they move towards next year, things that they can make a little better, make their life a little easier to help them be better prepared for their taxes next year?
Okay. There's a couple of different things I was thinking about bringing up. The first one is to make sure that you're picking up your net operating losses. There's a lot of people who still do their own taxes, and they don't really understand that there's a relationship between one year and the next. If in 2019 you had a loss, that loss may actually not 2019, but 2020, you had a loss. That loss may actually carry over into 2021, and you can use it to offset income in 2021. If you're not familiar with that, you may want to talk to someone who's a professional tax advisor. Other things to consider is the timing of your estimated taxes for 2021. The economy is just coming back, and we think we're going to be doing well, but you might want to be cautious about making a lot of tax payments, especially if you have losses carrying forward that might offset your income for this year. I know my own wife is kind of curious about why her taxes are so low every quarter this year compared to prior years. I'm like, well, because you got a loss from last year that we're carrying forward that offsets a big chunk of what you're doing.
Right.
And other things to consider is make sure you're planning for the taxability of the PPP loan. And then we sort of start to get back to the normal routines of things that save people tax money, things like, solar installations and retirement plans and some other stuff. But, it would be nice to get back to normal around here. I must say that.
I hear that. On that note, if I can ask a question, can we get a refresher on the solar installations? Because for years we've heard, okay, these credits are going to end. Where are we at on these solar tax credits?
Well, the Hawaii credit is still around, which is up to 35% credit with a number of limitations that effectively can reduce it. But it starts off as a 35% credit. The Fed credit, I think, is down this year. I think it's down to 24%, although under the Biden administration there's been some noise about extending it further, because I think it expires either this year or next year.
Okay.
So you still have the federal and the state credit available this year. And those credits are very lucrative, especially for a business, which on top of being able to take the credits can also depreciate the asset. If you're in a top tax bracket, you still have, the benefit of the depreciation for a business as well as the two tax credits can be, in a top tax bracket, it used to be over 100% of the cost of the system if you were in a 39.6 tax bracket, although I haven't done that math in a year or so. and of course, with a reducing federal credit, might not get you there. But the solar still remains one of the most lucrative and environmentally friendly ways to save tax money. The one big difference that sort of slowed everything and became a speed bump a few years ago was the need to start adding battery systems, which in theory increase the cost of the system substantially. And they do increase the cost of the system substantially, almost double it. But the batteries allow you to have power when the power's out on Maui. And they also are, as long as you put them in when you put the solar in, they're also valid for the same credit. So you sort of get to the same place you were before.
Awesome. Well, and yes, and I'm a big fan of those batteries in the past. We worried about, the solar systems were spectacular, and many times they work very smoothly. But again, there are those periods during the year where we just had a lot of cloud cover and a lot of rain. And so I think the batteries are a great option. So glad to hear that also applies for the credit. And even though you pay more, you get a better credit on that. Well, Doug, I could go, you and I could talk forever, and unfortunately our time is up, but we can bring you back on again because you're such a treasure trove of information. But thank you so much for joining us early in the morning.
You're very welcome, Pam. It was a pleasure being on.
It was great to have you. Nice talking to you, Doug. Aloha. So I just wanted to quickly mention this show is sponsored by Sherry Reeve Gallery and Gifts. Sherry is a renowned watercolorist who offers an array of bright and beautiful art for every occasion. She also has what we dub Sherry shirts that are comfortable and beautifully decorated by her art. You can find Sherry shirts and her many other gifts at her gallery in historic Makawao town. It is now my pleasure to invite one of our great Made in Maui County Festival vendors and welcome Kala'ai Tangonan, owner of Kupu Molokai, and she has products that were Kapuna inspired, Wahine designed. Aloha.
Aloha. Good morning from Molokai. Hi, Pamela.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you guys over there?
Oh, well, it's a bright and beautiful day here. How's the weather there?
Lovely.
Always
beautiful.
Always beautiful. You are always such a positive person in this world, and we're so glad to have you on this morning.
Thank you for having us.
You bet. You folks have really just been doing just a phenomenal job. You have beautiful textiles, great wearable art. Tell us about how you got into this process, your printing process and stamping. Tell us a little bit about your background and history on the product.
Okay, thank you. I'd love to. Basically, we were just a ohana, and a lot of our, I would say, not inspiration, but maybe, attention and desires came from just growing up here on the island, being in a halau. My mother was a person that would help a lot with our fundraising situation. So that was my first introduction to a lot of my art, the silk screening. And then the second person that I would like to, shed some light on or appreciate is another artist. Her name is Sarai Strickland. And she's the first person that showed me how to do batik art, which a lot of people are not too familiar with, but it's basically a resistance art using wax. And this technique is painted on the fabric and then dip dyed in different types of dyes. Natural dyes we use silk dyes, and basically we create these images, and the real magic is in the wax and the handling. So what it does is it crackles and it creates designs that you can't get.
They're beautiful.
And that's how I started from when we were very small on the island here, yes.
Yes. And tell us about how you've grown over the years.
Okay, so basically it was me. I went out, got like a art degree, came back home, had a bunch of kids, and I was like, sisters, you guys want to go in business, sisters? And so I'm the oldest of a family of 9, and we have 7 girls and 2 boys. And at the time, one sister said, I want to do it, I want to do it. So we got together, and now the whole family's involved, and we're just trying to make it along with this recent pandemic. A lot of the things that we're doing, we kind of just, we didn't know what to do. Everybody just kind of ceased, It was like, what's happening? And then we made it through with the Made in Maui online, and that was interesting. That was hard and interesting.
It was a start. Every time it's just not the same as when it's live.
I know.
It's not the same. It takes more time and definitely more investment to grow and build that audience there.
Yes.
But we're still working on it. We do hope to do live this year. We're praying that we could actually do a hybrid this year.
We're still here too, yes. Loved it. Participated from the very beginning, we did. Yes, it's wonderful. It's a wonderful opportunity. I would suggest anybody to do it. The assistance and the help from the county, from the Maui Chamber of Commerce, everybody involved, unbelievable. Wonderful people.
Thank you so much, and we're so proud of you. We have watched your growth. We think your designs are stunning. You have an awesome team, and as you said, how many children do you have?
I have 7.
Yeah, 7. A dynamic mother of 7, leading this phenomenal company. So we've got just a couple of minutes, but I want to have you tell people, where can they find your products?
Also on Maui, right now we're working with Native Intelligence.
Fantastic.
With Jenny over there. And we kind of had a little bit of hard time during the COVID, so one of our shops are down, and then we're trying to reopen up. And then online right now we're working on that too. That was kind of a challenge.
Okay.
Now, just Native Intelligence and maybe Instagram.
Okay. And you're still up on the marketplace. Are you?
Yes.
And so you can also go to madeInMauiCountyFestival.com, and they're still up on the marketplace. So that's going to be up for several months. So Father's Day, every holiday they have great things. So actually, you know what? I am so sorry. We are already out of time, but Kala'e, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us. I'm sorry it went so quick this morning, but we'll bring you on again. And this show is going very fast today, so we just want to thank our sponsors, Mokulele Airlines and Sherry Reeve Gallery and Gifts. I'm Pamela Timpot, president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, and we are wishing you blessings and aloha for a beautiful Maui day.